Other people asked, is it really true that a YouTube video is either always only communicative or always only expressive? This was my fault, I should have been clearer with that. I do think that the same YouTube video can be one and the same. It can be both, it can be slightly more than one than the other. Again, what I was trying to get at is what happens if we emphasize the communication angle and look at it in terms of communication. What happens then? Monkey Who Would Be King asked if I could say a little bit more about how LGBT art and indigenous art and art from perspectives of people who've traditionally been oppressed and silenced, how that can be challenging even if it's more expressive than communicative. So when I wrote that sentence in the script, I had in mind an exhibition I went to see in the Auckland Museum of Art. Shout out to anybody watching this in New Zealand. And I think it was on the ground floor of that museum. There was a whole section which was devoted to Maori artists. And there was specifically a few exhibits about the historical theft of Maori lands. And I was struck by the fact that even though I didn't really know the history in that much detail and wasn't really able to absorb all the details of the message being communicated there, I was nevertheless very conscious of the fact that, you know, even relatively recently, there just wouldn't have been a section of Maori artists. They just wouldn't have been in the museum. So just by existing in that space, it was challenging very old preconceived notions of what art should be and like power relations to art, even though to me specifically some of the details of the message weren't being communicated. So it was expressing something, and it was doing sort of a valuable social function, even though it was less communicative specifically to me. I hope that helps. I hope it makes it slightly clearer. I also did a video on bullying and harassment online and how we on YouTube and off YouTube talk about it, and CC said that harassment is part of life and we shouldn't pretend it doesn't exist, and if people don't like it they can just turn off their laptops. Yes, harassment is a part of life, but the point is that it shouldn't be, and although we may never be able to create a world in which there is no kind of harassment or bullying, every step we take to that and get closer to it will make the world slightly better. And if we put in a little bit of work, we could take steps towards that. So like, why would we not do that? Also, not everyone can walk away to the extent that I think you think they can. For those of us whose jobs are online and having to sit down and interact with people online every single day, turning it off and walking away isn't really an option. Similarly, for people who do a lot of work online, like journalists, just not interacting with that whole thing, it's not really an option. And again, even if it was, we shouldn't really have to take that. So perhaps this commenter was having a bad day or something, so I'm not going to have a go, but I think that attitude is less than helpful. Nathan King and Mr. Martin pointed out, very truly in fact, that I at no point in my video defined bullying or harassment, and you are quite right, I did not. I was responding to a panel at Summer in the City, as I said, about bullying and harassment, and that panel, to my memory, didn't define either of them either. And that's interesting because although we never really defined it, everybody seemed to have a very clear idea of what we were talking about. But of course, if we were to draw up policies or kind of guidelines for moderation of a community, we would need to have some kind of working definition as to what we were talking about. So that's a very good and interesting, thought-provoking point. R. Sato74 quite rightly brought me up on something, and this is my favourite comment of the week. They noted that I rarely ridicule people. I sometimes have a cheeky pop every now and again, but overall I try, and I hope I succeed, to keep the tone of what I'm saying quite light and sweet. However, some YouTubers that I have recommended or even worked with in the past don't do that, and some of them do get a little bit mean sometimes. So how do I square that? When I started my channel, I made a promise to myself that I would never use the channel to deliberately try and make anyone feel bad. I had seen big YouTube channels in the past, even not necessarily without meaning to, just because of their size, draw a lot of attention to people and make them feel small and make them feel insecure. And I promised myself I didn't ever want to try and do that. I hope I have stuck to that promise. I do occasionally screenshot ridiculous comments and make fun of them on Twitter, but I usually remember to anonymize whoever's left it because I don't want people sort of, what's the term, like raiding, when you Dogpiling, that's the term I'm looking for. I don't want people sort of dogpiling. I don't engage with aggressive replies or really with reply videos. I'm very careful about what I say on live streams. I don't want to engage in YouTube drama specifically. I'm not kind of interested in getting involved in that. You know, I have my friends who are YouTubers, and behind the scenes sometimes I have friends who are YouTubers who are subject to kind of personal attacks, and I do commiserate with them and talk to them about that, but I try and keep that behind the scenes. Basically, if I don't have something positive to say about somebody, not necessarily an idea, not necessarily an institution, because there's criticism there, then criticism's important, but an individual, if I don't have something positive to say about them, especially if they're a YouTuber, then I will usually try to say nothing. I don't always succeed in that, and those of you who are particularly attentive might sometimes be able to kind of read between the lines a little bit, but I try that, and that's something that recently as well I have been redoubling my efforts on. That's sometimes very difficult, and it sometimes means there are things that I'd like to say, but I don't. I don't think that would be a good. I don't think it would be a good world if everybody adopted that policy. Sometimes people need to be criticised, I guess. But I try not to do call-outs, and it's not a moral thing necessarily. It's kind of, if I'm perfectly honest with you, it's mainly just sort of my own peace of mind. Not every YouTuber does do that, and I don't think that every YouTuber should do that. But you noticed Miles Power and the Messianic Manic are two YouTubers who I've worked with in the past and who I'm sort of friends and colleagues with, who do occasionally get the knives out a little bit more, and you asked how do I square that? I have to say I'm not all that caught up on the Messianic Manic and Miles Power's recent stuff, so I can't speak as to the content or the tone of what they've been putting out recently. I think this is a question I'm gonna have to live for myself. I'm sorry I don't really have a more satisfying answer to it than that. So thank you for asking that, because even though I don't really have a hugely satisfying answer to it, I am very satisfied insofar as the question has been asked. Just dropped my pen. Those are all the comments I have time for. I have a big audition tomorrow, so I need to go and prepare for that and practice my singing! So that audition is tomorrow as far as I'm concerned, but will be yesterday as far as you're concerned. So wish me luck, or commiserations, depending on what happens. And without further ado, I will leave you with the credits.